Back in 2016, my husband and I decided to take a camping trip in eastern Pennsylvania. Money was tight for both of us then, so we weren't aiming for one of those nice campgrounds with showers and paved sites. We wanted something rough and simple. We found a spot where camping was free, basically just untouched state forest land. There was barely even a road, no cell reception, and according to the map, we were miles from the nearest tiny town. Total isolation was exactly what we were after, and we definitely got it. But we weren't as alone as we thought. On the way in, bouncing down a muddy, rutted gravel trail, we passed two people who, thinking back, were major red flags. I don't know if they had anything to do with what happened later, but they set the mood for the whole trip. The first was a woman standing next to a pickup truck pulled off to the side of the narrow road. The hood was up. Normally, my husband is the kind of guy who will stop and help anyone. He keeps jumper cables and tools in the trunk, and he's pretty handy. But as we approached, he just slowed down slightly, looked at her, and kept driving. I asked why he didn't stop. He said something about her felt wrong. He told me, people stranded out here usually look relieved when they see another car. They wave you down, try to get your attention. She didn't do any of that. She just stared at us like she expected us to stop. I honestly hadn't noticed that. I only saw a woman who might need help, but I trusted his instincts. We kept driving another 20 minutes until we found a clearing that looked okay. It had been raining a lot that week, so everything was soaked. The ground was mostly mud and wet leaves, but we found a slightly raised patch of land for the tent. While we were setting up and trying to get a fire going with soggy wood for hot dogs, we had our second strange encounter. A beat-up blue sedan crept past us slowly. It was odd because the road didn't lead anywhere except deeper into the woods. About 10 minutes later, the same car came back the other way. The driver, a middle-aged man with a thick beard, stared right at us as he passed. He didn't wave or nod. He just watched until he disappeared around a bend. 15 minutes later, he drove by again, heading back into the woods. My husband was getting uneasy. He pointed out that the guy didn't have camping gear in the car at all. He was just driving back and forth on a dead-end dirt road. We briefly talked about packing up immediately. The vibe was awful, but we had already spent 2 hours searching for a somewhat dry spot, and the mud on the main track was getting worse. We figured if we moved, our tire tracks would lead directly to our new site anyway. So we rationalized it. Maybe he was a local scouting for a hunting area. Or maybe he was just an oddball. He didn't pass a fourth time. We ate our hot dogs, drank some water, and messed around until dark. The woods get unbelievably dark without light pollution. We crawled into the tent around 10, and despite the earlier weirdness, we fell asleep quickly. Sometime around 3 in the morning, I was jolted awake by the loudest sound I have ever heard in the woods. I can't describe it perfectly. It didn't sound like any animal. It was mechanical. My husband later said it sounded like a chain gun spooling up, that metallic grinding before it actually fires. Another way he put it was like someone dragging a metal shovel over gravel, but blasted through massive speakers. It was aggressive, unnatural, and terrifyingly loud. My husband bolted upright in his sleeping bag. He scrambled to the little mesh window of the tent and peered outside. Everything was silent now, just normal crickets. What was that? I whispered, shaking. He stayed silent for a moment, still watching. Then he lay back down, but he wasn't relaxed. It was probably some machinery far in the distance, he told me. Sound carries weird out here. Try to sleep. I wanted to believe him, so I tried closing my eyes, but he didn't go back to sleep. I could feel him lying perfectly still beside me, tense, listening. Every tiny noise outside suddenly sounded like footsteps. A twig snapping became a boot step. The wind rustling wet leaves sounded like someone brushing the tent. After about 20 minutes of lying there in the dark, scared, he suddenly sat up. "Get dressed," he said, his voice low and serious now. "We're leaving." I didn't argue. I yanked my jeans on over my pajama pants. Before he unzipped the tent flap, he reached into his duffel and pulled out a machete we had bought for the trip. It was still in its plastic packaging. He tore the plastic off as quietly as possible. That honestly scared me more than anything, seeing him feel like he needed it right then. "Stay close. We're throwing everything into the trunk. Don't fold anything," he said. We burst out of the tent. The moonlight was bright enough that we could see most of the campsite clearly. No one was there. We moved fast, adrenaline surging, tossing the sleeping bags and tent into the car in a messy pile. I kept scanning the tree line, expecting that bearded man to be standing there watching. Just as we were about to get in the car, I saw it. Next to our fire pit, now just cold gray ash, was a soda can. It was standing perfectly upright. We didn't drink soda. We hadn't brought any cans at all, and it definitely wasn't there when we went to sleep. Someone had been right outside our thin nylon tent while we slept. We dove into the car and locked the doors. My husband jammed the keys into the ignition, and that's when he told me the truth. "That sound wasn't miles away," he said as we sped down the muddy track, fishtailing around corners. "It sounded like it was 50 feet down the road. I just didn't want you panicking while we were stuck in the tent." He kept checking the rearview mirror, worried we were being followed. He also admitted he was half expecting the car not to start. He thought maybe the reason they hadn't attacked yet was because they had siphoned our gas to trap us there. Luckily, we had a hybrid. Even if the tank was drained, the battery would get us a few miles closer to civilization. We joked nervously later that it could be a great commercial, number of brutal murders avoided by owning a hybrid. We didn't see the blue car or the broken-down truck on the way out. We drove until we reached a main highway and found a cheap motel with bright parking lot lights. I don't know what that sound was. I don't know if it was the guy in the sedan trying to scare us out of our tent or something entirely different, but I do know someone was close enough to hear us breathing while we slept, and they left that soda can to make sure we knew it. We still go camping, but now we stick to state parks with rangers and plenty of other people nearby. I spent my freshman winter break visiting my cousins up in North Dakota. If you've never been there during winter, you can't imagine how empty it feels. It's just endless stretches of flat snow and freezing wind that slices straight through you. One night, we were at one of their friends' houses with a few other girls. It got late, around 3 a.m., and I was exhausted. I didn't want to crash on a basement floor, so I figured I'd just walk back to my cousin's place. The town wasn't big. The houses were spaced out with woods and open fields separating them. The cold slammed into me when I stepped outside. The moonlight reflected off the snow, so it was brighter than you'd expect. I followed the usual shortcut, which cut behind the friend's house, through a patch of woods, and across a huge open field toward my cousin's neighborhood. I was trudging through the deep snow, head tucked against the wind, just trying to get home quickly. I happened to glance up and to my left, around 10 o'clock from where I stood, maybe 75 yards away, near the tree line, and there was another person walking in the opposite direction. I spotted him a split second before he noticed me. When he saw me, he jerked his shoulders up like I had startled him. I laughed out loud from nerves since he scared me. I gave a small wave, kind of like, "Oops, sorry, didn't mean to spook you." He didn't wave back. He stopped completely and just stared. I stopped too, expecting him to say something. That's when I realized he was wearing a full ski mask. Not unusual for the weather, but he was massive. Really tall. We stood there for what felt like forever, just two strangers in a frozen field at 3 a.m. A jolt went through me, and it wasn't from the cold. My instincts screamed that I needed to leave immediately. I turned away and started walking fast toward the path. When I glanced back, he wasn't standing still anymore. He was sprinting straight at me. Adrenaline flooded me. I knew if I stayed in the open, he'd catch me instantly. I made a snap choice and darted into the thicker woods, hoping the trees would slow him down. The snow was deeper there, and I kept stumbling over unseen roots. I could hear him behind me, heavy footsteps crunching through the snow, getting closer. I pushed harder, lungs on fire. Then, in a small clearing ahead, I saw two more figures standing completely still. They were also wearing ski masks. I almost stopped, thinking maybe they could help, but they slowly raised their hands and waved at me in perfect sync. It was the eeriest thing I'd ever seen. It wasn't a friendly wave, it felt like a warning or a trap. I didn't take the path toward them. I veered sharply to the right, plunging into untouched, pitch-black woods. I ran until I physically couldn't anymore, until my legs gave out and I collapsed in the snow. I listened, nothing. No footsteps, no breathing. I had lost them, but I was totally lost too. I wandered for maybe an hour, half frozen, until I spotted a dim yellow glow through the trees. A tiny, weather-beaten cabin. I didn't care who lived there, I needed warmth or I'd freeze. I banged on the door, shaking violently. After a moment, an elderly woman opened it. She looked surprised but gentle. I quickly explained that I got turned around and was freezing. She let me in immediately, wrapped me in a blanket, and made me hot tea. She was incredibly kind, the exact type of sweet grandmotherly figure you'd hope to find in the woods. She said it wasn't safe to walk back now in the dark, but I could sleep on her couch. "My son will be here in the morning," she said. "He has a truck. He can drive you to your cousin's." I was so relieved I nearly cried. I fell asleep hard, drained from fear. I woke to the smell of coffee and the heavy thud of a door closing. "Good morning, dear," the old woman called from the kitchen. "My son just arrived." I sat up, rubbing my eyes, and looked toward the door. A man stood there, stomping snow off enormous boots. He was huge. He wore the same dark jacket and pants as the man from the field. When he looked up, my blood went cold. He wasn't wearing the ski mask anymore, he was holding it in his hand. It was him, the one who chased me. He didn't look surprised at all. He just stared with this strange half-smile. "Ready for that ride?" he asked, voice low and flat. "I actually think I know where I am now," I blurted out, jumping up and grabbing my coat. My hands shook so badly I fumbled the zipper. "It looks much clearer in the daylight," I told them. "I'll just walk. Thank you so much for everything." I didn't wait for an argument. I slipped past him, avoiding contact, and burst out the door. I practically ran all the way back to my cousin's house in the daylight. I haven't gone back to North Dakota since. I recall being 18, the age at which you were finally considered a senior in our local scout troop. It was essentially our version of the Boy Scouts, though we went by a different name like the Youth Rangers or something along those lines. Our major rite of passage was the Three-Feather Challenge, designed to instill character and teach essential survival skills. The first day involved a complete fast with only water, leaving you to linger around camp with a perpetually growling stomach. The second day was one of total silence, forcing you to communicate through gestures, which made all group tasks incredibly awkward. The third day was the real test, a full 24 hours completely alone in the wilderness with nothing but a pocket knife and a tarp for shelter. The objective was to remain completely unseen by any other person, then stealthily return to camp at dawn without being spotted by the sentries. Reporting successfully to the camp master would earn you your feathers. I handled the first 2 days with relative ease. The hunger was unpleasant but manageable, and the silent day was just strange, constantly catching myself on the verge of speech. For the third day, I felt prepared. I collected my knife and tarp, gave a wave to the others, and set out from camp. Our woods were part of a large estate park up in the northeast, thick with pine and oak trees, where the trails would simply vanish if you ventured deep enough. I hiked for what felt like hours, covering 5 or 6 miles into overgrown areas where thorns scraped my arms and tangled roots made the ground treacherous. I was determined to find the most isolated spot possible, somewhere with no risk of an accidental encounter with a hiker. I eventually discovered a small clearing encircled by dense brush, about as remote as you could get without being truly lost. I rigged my tarp between 2 trees to form a lean-to and passed some time by sharpening a stick with my knife. The day moved with agonizing slowness. I did some cautious exploring of the immediate area, observed some birds, and did a lot of thinking. When sunset came, the atmosphere shifted. The sounds of the forest transformed, the wind rustling leaves, the distant call of an owl, the unsettling snap of branches that suggested something was moving out there. Despite the eeriness, the night passed without incident. I curled up beneath my tarp, knife in hand, and drifted in and out of a fitful sleep, waking occasionally to rustling sounds I assured myself were just deer or raccoons. As dawn approached and the sky lightened to gray, I planned to pack up and sneak back. However, I felt grimy and sweaty from the previous day, and I remembered a lake shown on the map about a quarter-mile away. I thought a quick, invigorating swim would cleanse me and wake me up before the return journey. Surely no one would be around at that hour. I stripped, left my clothes by the tarp, and walked barefoot toward the water. The ground was cold and dewy, with sharp sticks prodding my feet. As I pushed through the reeds near the lake's edge, I spotted them, 4 or 5 men on the bank with fishing rods, early morning anglers who were quiet and hadn't noticed me. I immediately thought, damn, I can't let them see me, as it would break the rules. I turned to retreat quietly to get my clothes, but then it happened. One step, the ground felt soft like moss, but then it crumbled away without warning. I dropped suddenly, sinking up to my armpits in a thick, slimy mess. It was a bizarre mix of cold and warm, with floating chunks all around me. Then the smell hit me like a physical blow, a nauseating mix of rotten meat and blood, all fermented together. I gagged instantly, bile rising in my throat. I tried to pull myself out, but my hands just sank deeper, grabbing handfuls of what felt like slippery, stringy organs. I screamed in pure, unadulterated panic. I had fallen into a pit, likely dug by poachers. I'd heard rangers tell stories of hunters illegally dumping deer guts in hidden spots to conceal their activities. This one must have been festering for weeks, rotting in the heat and probably teeming with maggots. I was covered from head to toe, the blood and unspeakable filth clinging to my skin and hair. I frantically clawed at the pit's edge, the dirt giving way until I finally hauled myself out onto my stomach, weeping from the shock and the overwhelming stench. All I could think about was getting clean. I staggered to my feet, naked and coated in that vile substance, and ran screaming toward the lake. I wasn't thinking about the fishermen anymore, I just had to wash it off. My feet slapped the ground as I ran, sobbing, with tears cutting through the grime on my face. From their perspective, I can only imagine the scene. They were enjoying a peaceful dawn fishing trip when an unearthly scream echoed from the woods. They dropped their rods and ran to investigate, perhaps thinking someone was hurt. Then the bushes parted and this thing emerged, a kid-shaped monster, slathered in red and black gore with bits dangling off, eyes wide with madness. It was shrieking and sobbing, and then it charged directly at them. One of the men panicked, snatched a hunting rifle from the ground, and fired a shot that whizzed past me and hit the dirt near my feet. I screamed even louder and plunged headlong into the lake, my heart hammering so violently I thought it would explode. Once they saw me splashing in the water, they realized I was just a terrified kid. The man with the rifle lowered it, shouting apologies. They stood there in stunned silence before one called out, "Hey, you okay, kid?" Another approached, his face pale as he recognized I was human and not the monster they had initially seen. I managed to gasp out an explanation between breaths. Scout challenge, fell in a gut pit. They helped me out, lent me a shirt, and contacted the rangers. I had obviously failed the challenge, having been seen in such a dramatic fashion, though the camp master let it slide after hearing the full story. Still, the smell haunted me for days. I showered 3 times, but the memory of it lingered in my nostrils. I never went back to those particular woods. The poachers were eventually caught, and the pit was filled in. But that morning truly felt like a personal hell on earth.